Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we meet again on the air in this week's edition of Man and Nature. Just a brief recap, last week we discussed the topic of the link between ESG and climate change with our guest, Associate Professor Dr. Zul Ilham bin Zulkifli Lubis from the Institute of Biological Sciences, Faculty of Science, University Malaya. And in our discussion last week, Dr. Zul Ilham highlighted the importance of using ESG as a practical framework in addressing problems pertaining to climate change. Now, our knowledge on climate change primarily is contributed by knowledge in the climate sciences. And this actually highlights the importance of science and technology in addressing and mitigating real world problems. And today, inshallah, we will take a step back from our primary focus on managing disasters and addressing issues related to climate change by looking at how science and technology can be utilized for the prosperity of the Ummah. And for this, we are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Zurina Mokhtar, Head of Science and Technology Division, ASEAN Secretariat based in Jakarta. She joins me online from Jakarta to discuss our topic today, Science and Technology for the Prosperity of the Ummah. As a brief background, Dr. Zurina holds a PhD in engineering from the University of Cambridge and has served at a number of ministries in Malaysia as well as the United Nations in New York. Assalamualaikum, Dr. Zurina. Thank you for joining me.
Walaikum salam. Thank you so much, Dr. Shea, Kim, for having me. It is truly an honor to be here.
It's our pleasure to have you, inshallah. Now, Doctor, perhaps to begin with our discussion, could you share with our listeners your thoughts as someone who heads a science and technology division at the regional level regarding the role of science and technology in contributing towards the prosperity of the Ummah?
Okay, so yes, I'm heading the Science and Technology Division for about a year now, and from my, I would say, limited experience, I can vouch for the fact that science and technology has been playing a huge role to the prosperity of Ummah in so many fronts. I think first off, I need to also expound the meaning of prosperity of Ummah to something simpler, which is the well-being of the community. So what we are discussing is essentially the role of science and technology for the well-being of our community. Speaking of which, whether we realize it or not, regardless of our background, our age, our skin color, our division, we've been benefiting tremendously from science and technology in so many ways. So, in my capacity, together with my team, our main role is to coordinate, to facilitate and implement regional science and technology initiatives guided by our plan of action, the ASEAN Plan of Action on STI. So last year, we monitored, we evaluated, and implement more than 90 projects centered around science and technology, from simple projects like a training program to more complicated ones like weather modification, setting up ground stations that communicate with the spacecrafts or malaria epidemiological transition, and also projects like real-time epidemic surveillance for our preparedness in the upcoming epidemic. So all these initiatives, they are rooted from science technology that is crafted in a way that it would directly benefit humankind or simply the community. So we make sure that technological development and science today is driven by not just what scientists think that we need, driven by not just the market forces, but equally important, science must be driven by the need to reflect and respond to the basic needs of our community. Let me just give, if I may, some examples, maybe one or two examples of the initiatives that we implemented last year. One is on ASEAN serosurveillance study. So this study aims to investigate the level of immunity of our population before COVID-19 vaccination. And we also have the rate of conversion of neutralizing antibodies and immunity. That's one example. Another good example is malaria modeling of transmission and surveillance in countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, which aims to establish malaria surveillance system. So this is to identify the hotspots and eventually decide on policy and also mitigating measures. So ultimately, all these kind of initiatives is aimed at improving the quality of life and also our well-being, the well-being of the people, the well-being of the community, and also the well-being of the Ummah. In other words, science and technology is one great platform, I would say the greatest platform to improve our understanding behind many phenomena and also in the end improve our livelihood of the community. Give me just 1 minute. I also like to touch on citizen science because when we speak about the role of science in contributing to well-being of the community, I cannot help myself to really think about the role of citizen science. Admittedly, in the past, science and technology is always being affiliated or associated to the educated elite, when ideally science and technology should be for everyone. It should be accessible to everyone in accordance with the capacity. So the remarkable milestones, achievements that we make trying to associate science with the community has given birth to the term citizen science, or what is also known as people powered science. Within the realm of citizen science itself, the community or the Ummah, the people, we are not just merely the beneficiary of science, but we are also empowered to be the contributor to science with given our respective capacity. Citizen science is when the mass, the public, people voluntarily helps conduct scientific research, and citizen scientists, we call them citizen scientists, they help in things like designing experiments. Most of them are involved in collecting data, analyzing results, and also in the end solve problems. In other words, the real scientists and also the citizen scientists, they partner to conduct research. A great examples, my alma mater, UMT, University Malaysia Terengganu, and WWF Malaysia, appointed villagers within the Wetland Institute, Terengganu, as citizen scientists. So these people, they were appointed institute to give information that improves our wetland data collection. So this is how the tacit knowledge owned by the mass, the public, or the citizen scientists is being, combined with the knowledge of the real scientists that would help improve our livelihood. So all things considered, I personally think that the idea behind citizen science is not just exciting, but it is also working in so many levels, not just in Malaysia, but also in many other countries. So going back to the question as to how does science and technology contribute to the prosperity of Ummah, short answer, science and technology has been contributing tremendously in enhancing our well-being, the well-being of the community at the local, national, regional level, just as important as how science also empowered humankind. So in the end, science itself is a body of knowledge that is used to improve our lives.
Right, thank you, Dr. Zurina. I'm excited by your mentioning of citizen science, because I think this is, while the term may be new, the
Mhm.
concept I think has been implemented for several decades already. Because I
That's
remember
true.
when I was in secondary school, I was involved with a project with the Ministry of Science at that time, where
Mhm.
school children actually collected data regarding acid rain.
Yeah,
So this is a way also that can inculcate interest in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And
that's true.
also, what you mentioned, I think, is very much in line with the thoughts of some thinkers, that science is actually a social endeavor. It
Mm,
involves society and not just
mm,
the privileged few. Okay,
mm,
Dr. Zurina, let's move on. In the context of regional science and technology landscape, who
mhm.
are the stakeholders of science and who are the Ummah?
Okay, so I think I had partly and informally answered this question in the first part, but nevertheless, I think this is an excellent and important question to address so that we are clear on who are the Ummah and who are the stakeholders of science. As I said, the Ummah is the community, the people,
Yeah,
the supra national community. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you should know this better, Dr. Sheh. In some premises, Ummah may be seen as exclusive to Muslim community, or at least the people of the book. But for the sake of our discussion today, I would prefer to define Ummah as in a more generic term that transcend national, racial, and also social division, something that really unites us all. As for the stakeholder of science, this is rather very broad because stakeholders of science are anyone or anything affected by, or involved in science. And of course, this technically means the community is already part of the science stakeholder because we are affected by and also we are already involved in science. There are so many ways on how we can actually segmentize or look at this. One of it by looking at the lens of what we call as a triple helix model, which is now I think already being elevated to quadruple helix model. During my student days, we call it just a triple helix model, and we have another additional one, which is the community. So the quadruple helix model recognizes four major actors of science and technology system, what we call as the SIPS, the science itself, the academia, industry, policy, and the society slash the community. By the way, what I just said really reminds me of my two colleagues, Dr. Azlin and Dr. Lina from UTM. In the past, during our student days, we did quite a lot of discussion on this model. So I hope they are tuning in. So anyway, that would be my view on what Ummah and also science stakeholders should entail.
Right. Thank you. Well, thank you especially for sharing about the quadruple helix model with all the four stakeholders: science, industry, policymakers, and also society. Now, Doctor, I think many of us are very much aware of this. The ideals of modern science, in some cases, seem to contradict the views of Islamic teachings, and many criticisms of modern science come from the value systems held by modern scientists. Now, why is scientific knowledge based on Islamic teachings in the contemporary setting often being questioned as contradicting modern science?
Right. So I think this is a rather strong claim. I would first reiterate that my area is some science policy, and my response to that question is by all means my personal view, nothing to do with my profession. Okay, let me try to synthesize this this way. As two concepts, Islamic teachings and science are related. I personally believe they are related because I know out there are people would debate on this. I'm saying that they should be independent. For me, they are related rather than separate. Hence, should ideally be compatible. I would like to start with the premise. For example, although not explicitly mentioned, it is truly amazing on how Quran touch upon scientific principles. Yeah, for example, on embryo development,
Yeah,
Surah Al-Zumur says, "He creates you in the wombs of your mother in stages, one after another." Explicitly mentioned in Quran that there are three vials of darkness. So how can we not relate this to the three trimesters of womb development? Yeah. So in my field of work, I have had the pleasure to associate myself with many amazing scientists, and I still recall very vividly in one of the conferences I attended, an astrophysicist, also an expert in hydrogen fuel cell, told me this. As an element in the periodic table, hydrogen is represented by the letter H. Yeah. So in Arabic, H is the letter Ha. In science, the sun is predominantly made of hydrogen. As interesting as it is, all verses in the chapter that talks about the sun in Quran ends with Ha. See how interesting is that? Maybe because I don't speak Arabic, that conversation never failed to amaze me until today. So some say this is just a coincidence. So, what about the verses related to quantum mechanics, black holes, solar system, and many more? In hindsight, how could we, as the incapable community, the incapable ummah, full of flaws, have known all this before? So, these are just a few examples. There are many more out there. It is an open secret how Quran made a prophecy statement about scientific phenomena that were later confirmed by scientific evidence. The point that I'm trying to come to here is science is a field that keeps on growing, keeps on updating, developing, renewing, and changing based on the newest findings, the newest evidence. Simple analogy like our phone, the iOS needs to be constantly updated based on new development. That is why in science, we need to keep on discovering in order to keep on learning. Yeah.
yeah,
What we know now, I mean, what we know in the past may already be obsolete or no longer valid now. Yeah. On another hand, Islam attempts to synthesize reasons and revelation, knowledge and values. Knowledge acquired through rational human efforts and through Quran are seen as complementary. This is what I said earlier. So, in other words, Islam advances the people, the Ummah, the community, to spread science and technology. According to our teaching, learning to develop science and technology is attributed to our faith. those who are knowledgeable and clearly have shown this will be rewarded very vastly in the hereafter. So the search of the truth is the method of Islam. Therefore, the pursuit of scientific knowledge should ideally strengthen our faith as a believer, which means to say that Islam and science should be an interlocking and complementary concept. So I think I'll just stop there.
All right, thank you, Dr. Zurina. I agree with what you said. This is one of the things that we've been saying quite a lot here at IKIM. Now, one another question to you, Doctor. In the past, Islamic science was at the forefront of the Islamic civilization,
Mm,
and we have so many Muslim luminaries who made
yes.
and discovered many innovations and inventions. I mean, the list is
Mm,
long for us to
mm,
mention one by one.
mm,
And they also developed many branches of knowledge. Sadly, today we see that Muslim countries only have 9 scientists per 1,000 people,
mm,
compared with the global average of 41. So, in your
mm.
opinion, what went wrong?
Right. So I think, arguably, there has been growing concern raised about the lack of scientific literacy and the decline of all these, amazing scientists that we used to have in the past in our modern Muslim world. When in the past, we have many brilliant minds whose contributions to science led a strong foundation for today's technology. So when you said that we only have 9 scientists per 1,000 people compared with the world average of 41, that is indeed a sadly staggering statistic. This is a growing concern, actually, not just in the Muslim modern world, but also in many other countries. So, put it this way, I'm not in the exact right position to really point out what is really contributing to the decline, but from my standpoint, from my limited experience, all I can say is some scientific literacy decline may be partly caused by factors like poor attainment or poor interest in STEM studies. You already mentioned this earlier, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics studies, the decline in interesting yet reliable science journalism, or even the digital divide, the gap between the haves and have-nots. This serious gap really, I would say, limit the unfortunate few's access to modern information and communication technology, where most of the updated scientific knowledge are being communicated these days. So the fact that science is growing in a very, very fast pace more than ever before may also limit the opportunities of the digitally challenged community to access information, and in the end cause the decline in scientific literacy. So I think that's my take on that question.
So, Doctor, in your opinion, in creating a prosperous Ummah, what are the
Mhm.
most critical areas of science and technology that we urgently need now? And
Mm.
where can we find the most updated knowledge on this?
Mm, right. So I think I believe this is the most relevant question for me to answer considering my capacity. There are three most non-category domain or branches of science, as we all know it: physical science, earth science, and life science. This can also be further expanded to five subcategories: biology, maths, physics, chemistry, and social science, those sciences that we took during school days. So regardless of how we categorize science, each branch or each domain has its own importance and important applications in life. So there are two things, yeah. The core of science itself and its application in life. Science is a very huge web that are interlinked vastly. Physical science may have or always have contribution and application in earth science and life science and vice versa. They're all connected. I don't have to look very far for an example. During my younger days, one of my many ambitions that keeps on changing was to be a forensic entomologist. I study insect, mostly fly life cycle, to help medical legal investigation. I'm always fascinated on how a small creature, a small insect, a fly, can give so much information to a crime scene. This is an example of how science help justly enforce criminal laws in real life. Yeah, let's look at it this way: the current state that we are in now, or the current problem that we are facing, those are the things that prompt scientific studies, because these scientific studies aim to address the current problem we are solving. So this would always relate our conversation or discussion on COVID-19. The recent COVID-19 pandemic is a plague, is a disease, is a medical problem that has resulted in countless scientific efforts aimed at combating it in the past few years. Yeah, Although from the outset, it seems to me, or it seems to us, that this is all life sciences, specifically virology, the study of virus, and microbiology that we critically need now. But if we look closer to combat COVID-19, we need all type of other sciences too. Earth science, for example, how is earth science contributing to combating COVID-19? So in our projects, one of the things that we are using is EOS, Earth Observing Satellites. We use some surface sensors and computer-based data sets to study the environmental, economic, and social impacts of COVID-19 pandemic, and to, in the end, determine whether environmental factors influence the spread of the virus. This is how life science interconnects with earth science in combating COVID. Yeah. So physics helps the scientists understand structural features and function of viral particles. Things like X-ray, MRI, those are all physics. So going back to a question of what are the most critical areas of science that we urgently need now, I would say that as cliche as it is may sound, I'm afraid I cannot put finger and point to only several areas of science disregarding the rest. My answer is all area of science, they're all critically important as they, in the one, they have their own value, serving different but complementing quest. The second part of the question is, I think, also an important question. Where and how can we find the most updated scientific knowledge? So I think for scientists, it's clear for them. They acquire scientific knowledge through observation of the natural phenomenon, the natural world. They perform experiments in the lab, or they run models. Yeah. For the public or for the mass, we need to always remember that scientific knowledge is global public good. A study argues that published scientific articles are now increasingly accessible and becoming more understandable. Considering there are too many outlets, too many ways on how science is being communicated, there are many outlets, there are many entry points, there are many sources on how we can find scientific knowledge. Of course, Quran is one of the great one. We have the internet, we have library, we have books, documentaries, science magazine, museum, or even the social media. Yes, social media is one of it. I remember last year we had a discussion with science teachers all around the world to discuss on how things like TikTok and Facebook can be leveraged to communicate science more effectively and efficiently. Then again, we need to also be careful of pseudoscience, all those faulty premises or knowledge mistakenly regarded as being based on scientific method floating around us, which aren't actually true.
Right. I think you emphasize the importance of science communication, in
Yeah,
particular to the general public who may not have a formal science background, but
yeah,
who may be interested in finding out more about scientific
mm,
discoveries. Now,
yes.
I think this relates to the last question, Dr. Zurina. How
Mhm.
can we, as an individual, play our role in utilizing science and technology better for the benefit of the Ummah?
Okay. So I think the question, if I may rephrase, is essentially asking how we, as one unit, as an individual of a larger community, could make use or utilize science and technology for the benefit of Ummah. To me, in order to better utilize science and technology, we need to first be involved in it. Yeah. Again, for scientists, they are already very actively associating themselves with activities like conferences, workshop, answering question, discussing scientific ideas, contributing to a scientific blog, or even participating in open data software projects. We have a lot of hackathons where all the scientists can contribute their energy and expertise in. Ideally, scientists should be the keeper, they should be the interpreter and also disseminator of scientific knowledge for the benefit of Ummah. And on the other hand, for the mass, for the public who are not like scientists are directly involved in scientific research, there is one unit of a larger community should utilize science based on their capacity. As I said, science is for everyone. We should see our effort contributing to science as an ibadah. We need to keep on updating, but at the same time be aware of pseudoscience and be aware of the unknown. The least we can do is updating our knowledge for the pursuit of improving our livelihood, or simply getting involved to become a citizen scientist. Yeah, as a community, the stronger grounding in science and technology that we have would provide a more sound foundation for success in not just our work but also our personal life. So, in the end, a well informed, articulate, scientifically literate, and socially active community is the type of community that we need to meet the challenges ahead of us. So, I think that would be my take to that question.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Zurina, for your insightful sharing in this week's Man and Nature. Alhamdulillah, it is very enlightening to actually hear your thoughts on this issue. As someone who has a hands-on experience, uh, in particular at the regional level,
Mhm.
vis-a-vis science and technology development. And from what you have shared, I believe that it is crucial for Muslims to regain mastery of science and technology as a means to not only prosper and develop, but also to tackle issues that are being faced today, including issues regarding climate change and natural disasters, etc. This is something that I believe we cannot ignore or take for granted, since it is our
Mhm.
responsibility as Khalifa to ensure that our world is being taken care of in the best possible way. Allow me to quote a prominent contemporary Muslim thinker, Ziauddin Sardar, in his book, Reading the Quran, The Contemporary Relevance of the Sacred Text of Islam. Ziauddin Sardar wrote, acquiring scientific knowledge requires endless devotion, serious thought, and constant effort. However, the pursuit of science must be a socially responsible activity. It needs a reasoned moral and ethical framework for its means and ends, as well as setting its priorities for research and development to make its fullest contribution to the transformative advancement of society and knowledge. To be true to their beliefs, Muslim societies need to put as much effort into science as they do on prayer and place science where it belongs, at the very center of Islamic culture. I think that quote actually essentially sums up our discussion today, Dr. Zurina.
That's very good quote. Yeah.
And with that food for thought, we have come to the end of our program today. And I would like to record my sincerest gratitude to Dr. Zorina Mokhtar, Head of Science and Technology Division, ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta, for taking time off of her busy schedule to grace Man and Nature this week. For our listeners, Man and Nature can be followed either on Radio IKIM or IKIM FM's Facebook page. Please share and forward this discussion to everyone so that its benefits can be widespread, inshallah. Thank you again, Dr. Zurina, for joining me
Thank
here
you very much. Thank
on
you.
the platform. Hope to see you soon when you get back to Malaysia, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. That's all the time that we have for this week's edition of Men and Nature. Until we meet again, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.